The doors to the advanced xenobiology classroom slid open with a soft hiss. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. The large room, filled with students from dozens of different worlds, fell completely silent. Minho stepped through the doorway and immediately felt the weight of 47 pairs of eyes watching his every move. Some of those eyes were huge and black, like a night sky. Others were tiny and clustered together in groups of 6 or 8. A few glowed softly in colors he had never seen before. He was used to this reaction by now. It had been the same in every class, every hallway, every dining area since he arrived at Nexus Academy 3 days ago. But it still made his stomach twist into knots. Professor Kethvar stood at the front of the classroom. The tall, blue-skinned teacher had 4 arms and skin that seemed to shimmer like water. His large, golden eyes blinked slowly as he watched Minho enter. "Class," Professor Kethvar said in his soft, musical voice, "please welcome our exchange student from Earth." The word Earth seemed to echo in the quiet room. Minho heard several students gasp. A few made clicking sounds that he had learned meant fear or worry in their languages. One student near the back actually stood up and moved to a seat farther away. Minho kept walking toward the empty seats. His footsteps sounded too loud on the smooth metal floor. He tried to walk softly, but even his careful steps seemed to frighten the other students. A group of bird-like creatures with beautiful silver feathers pressed themselves against the wall as he passed. He found an empty seat in the middle of the room and sat down slowly. The chair made a small creaking sound, and the student next to him jumped. She had pale green skin and long, thin fingers that ended in delicate claws. Her huge eyes stared at him for a moment before she quickly looked away. "Earth," whispered a student behind him. The voice was high and sweet, like music. "He's really from Earth." "I heard they eat other living things," another voice whispered back. This one sounded scared. "They sleep when it's dark, when all the dangerous things come out. My teacher said their world tried to kill them every day." Minho pretended not to hear the whispers, but each word felt like a small cut. He pulled out his data pad and tried to look busy while more students filed into the classroom. Each new arrival followed the same pattern. They would walk in, see him, and immediately find a seat as far away as possible. Professor Kethvar cleared his throat with a sound like water flowing over rocks. "Today we will study adaptation in hostile environments. We will look at how different species change to survive on dangerous worlds." The professor touched a control on his desk, and the lights dimmed. A large holographic display appeared in the center of the room, showing a beautiful blue and green planet covered in swirling white clouds. "This," the professor said, "is Earth. It is classified as a Class 12 death world." Several students made frightened sounds. The bird-like creatures ruffled their silver feathers. The green-skinned girl next to Minho moved her chair a few inches away from him. "The surface gravity is 0.97 standard." Professor Kethvar continued, reading from his notes. "The atmospheric pressure would crush most species we know. The weather systems can destroy entire cities in minutes. The planet has active volcanoes, earthquakes, and storms that produce electrical discharges. The hologram changed to show lightning flashing through dark clouds, waves crashing against cliffs, and snow falling so thick it looked like a wall of white. The life forms on Earth are equally dangerous," the professor went on. "Creatures that hunt in groups, others that can kill with poison or crushing force, some that are invisible until they attack." Minho watched the images change on the hologram. He saw lions chasing zebras, sharks swimming through dark water, and spiders building webs. To him, these were just normal things from home, but he could hear the other students gasping and clicking in fear. "And somehow," Professor Kethvar said, looking directly at Minho, "one species not only survived on this death world, but learned to control it." The room was so quiet that Minho could hear his own heartbeat. He could feel everyone staring at him again, but this time it was different. Before, they had looked at him with curiosity and fear. Now they looked at him like he was something impossible, something that should not exist. A student near the front raised her hand. She had smooth, gray skin and eyes that were solid black. "Professor," she said in a voice like wind through leaves, "how did they survive? What made them so different?" Professor Ketvar looked at Minho again. Perhaps, he said carefully, our guest would like to answer that question. Every eye in the room turned to Minho. The silence stretched out like a held breath. He knew what they wanted to hear. They wanted him to explain how humans had become killers, how they had turned into monsters that could survive anything. But looking around at all those frightened faces, Minho realized he did not know how to explain something that seemed so normal to him. How could he tell them that Earth was not a death world to him? It was just home. Minho stared at all the frightened faces looking back at him. The question hung in the air like a storm cloud. How did humans survive on Earth? What made them different? He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. Where could he even begin? How do you explain breathing to someone who has never needed air? He started, his voice sounding too loud in the quiet room. I don't know if I'm different. Earth is just home. A ripple of whispers spread through the classroom. The bird-like students ruffled their silver feathers nervously. The green-skinned girl next to him moved her chair even farther away. Professor Ketvar touched the control pad again. New images appeared on the hologram. Let's examine some basic facts about human physiology, he said in his musical voice. The display showed a human body with glowing lines pointing to different parts. Humans possess forward-facing eyes, the professor explained. This is a trait found only in predator species. Minho touched his own face without thinking. His eyes were just eyes. But he could see how the other students were looking at him now, focusing on his face with new fear. They also have sharp teeth designed for tearing flesh, Professor Ketvar continued. The hologram zoomed in on a human mouth, showing white teeth that suddenly looked very scary. A student with tentacles, instead of arms, raised one of them. Professor, she said in a bubbling voice, is it true that they consume other living creatures? Yes, the professor replied. Humans are omnivores. They eat both plant and animal matter. The tentacled student made a sound like water going down a drain. Several other students moved their chairs away from Minho. But lots of species eat meat. Minho said quickly, it's normal on Earth. The big cats, the wolves, even some fish. Exactly, said a crystalline student whose body looked like it was made of blue glass. You live with predators. You learn from them. You became like them. No, that's not. Minho tried to explain, but more students were talking now. I heard they fight wars against their own species, said the bird-like student. My data files say they've killed millions of each other, added another voice. They destroy their own planet for resources. They make weapons designed only for killing. Each statement felt like a punch to Minho's chest. Yes, humans had wars. Yes, they had problems. But that was not the whole story. That was not who he was. Professor Ketvar raised all four of his arms for silence. These are documented facts about human behavior, he said gently. We are not here to judge, but to understand. The hologram changed again. Now it showed human cities with tall buildings and busy streets. But the professor focused on different things. Notice the barriers, he said, pointing to walls and fences. Humans separate themselves from each other even in their own communities. Those are just property lines, Minho said. They help people know what belongs to them. Or they are territorial markers, suggested the crystalline student, like predators used to mark their hunting grounds. The green-skinned girl finally spoke. Her voice was soft and scared. Is it true that humans can move faster than most species? That they have quick reflexes? Minho nodded slowly. I guess we do move pretty fast sometimes. Predator traits, whispered several students at once. The professor brought up a new image. It showed humans running, jumping, climbing trees. Human bodies are designed to pursuit, he explained. They can run long distances without stopping. They can climb and swim. They have excellent hand-eye coordination. For hunting, said the tentacled student. For chasing prey that tries to escape. No, Minho said, louder than he meant to. Several students jumped in their seats. We run for fun, for exercise, for sports. Not everything is about hunting. But even as he said it, Minho could see they did not believe him. Every explanation he gave seemed to make things worse. When he talked about sports, they heard competition and aggression. When he mentioned exercise, they thought of training for battle. A new student spoke up from the back of the room. He had purple skin and 3 eyes. What about your emotional responses? I read that humans can become angry very quickly. Everyone gets angry sometimes, Minho said. But human anger is different, the purple student continued. It makes you stronger, faster, more dangerous. It is called adrenaline response. Yes? Professor Kethvar nodded. Human biochemistry changes during stress. Their bodies prepare for violence automatically. Minho felt trapped. Every normal human trait was being twisted into something scary. His heart was beating faster now, and he could feel his face getting warm. But he knew that if he showed any sign of being upset, it would just prove their point about human aggression. We also get adrenaline when we're scared, he said quietly. When we need to run away from danger, it's not always about fighting. But you could fight, said the crystalline student, if you wanted to, if you needed to. Minho looked around the room at all the frightened faces. He realized there was no right answer. If he said yes, he could fight, they would be more afraid. If he said no, they would not believe him. I don't want to fight anyone, he said finally. The room was quiet for a long moment. Then the green-skinned girl spoke in her soft voice. But you could, if you had to. That's what makes you dangerous. The next day's lab session started quietly. Minho sat at his assigned table with 3 other students who had been forced to work with him. They kept their distance, speaking in whispers and glancing at him nervously. At the table next to him, Sujin unpacked her equipment. She was the only other human in the class, and Minho felt grateful to see a familiar face. But even Sujin seemed tense today. The other students' fear was getting to both of them. Professor Kethvar moved between the tables, checking on each group's progress. Today we will observe live specimens, he announced. Each table has a different creature from various worlds. Remember, these are dangerous life forms kept in secure containers for your safety. Minho looked at the metal box on his table. It hummed softly, and he could see the blue glow of an energy barrier through the small viewing window. Inside, something moved in the shadows. What is it? Asked Yelna, the green-skinned girl who had been moved to his table. She stayed as far from the container as possible. Professor Kethvar checked his datapad. A Kurtaki acid spitter from the Vega system. It uses corrosive projectiles to hunt. The barrier will protect you, but do not touch the container directly. The crystalline student at their table, who had introduced himself as Zinktar, made a worried chiming sound. Should we really be working with something so dangerous? The barriers are completely safe, the professor assured them. They have never failed in 20 years of use. Minho leaned forward to get a better look at the creature. It was about the size of a cat, with 6 legs and a long tail that ended in what looked like a small cannon. Dark purple scales covered its body, and its eyes glowed yellow in the dim light of the container. It's actually kind of cute, Minho said without thinking. All 3 of his table partners stared at him in shock. Cute. Yelna's voice was barely a whisper. It could dissolve your skin in seconds. But it can't get out, Minho replied. And look at how it moves. It's graceful. Zinktar's crystalline body flickered with nervous light. Only a predator would find another predator cute. Before Minho could respond, a loud crackling sound filled the air. The blue glow around their container flickered and died. Emergency lights began flashing red throughout the lab. Barrier failure on table 7, Professor Kethvar called out, his forearms moving quickly over his control panel. Everyone moved back slowly. Do not make sudden movements. But it was too late. The Kurtaki had already noticed that its prison was gone. It pressed against the clear walls of the container, and Minho could hear a soft hissing sound as its acid began eating through the material. Students screamed and ran for the exits. Chairs crashed to the floor. The bird-like students took flight, their wings beating frantically as they tried to reach the ceiling. Zinktar's crystal body went completely dark with fear. The container wall gave way with a wet tearing sound. The Kurtaki dropped to the table and immediately began spitting acid in all directions. Yellow drops at the floor and started smoking. The acrid smell filled the air. Professor HFY was shouting instructions, but his voice was lost in the chaos. Students pushed and shoved, trying to get through the single exit door. Some were crying. Others were making distress calls in languages Minho didn't understand. Yelna stood frozen beside the table, too scared to move. The Kurtiki turned toward her, its tail cannon aiming at her chest. Minho didn't think. He just moved. He grabbed a metal tray from the next table and stepped between Yelna and the creature. The acid hit the tray with a sizzling sound, but the metal held. The Kurtiki hissed and prepared to spit again. "Get behind me," Minho told Yelna. Keep his eyes on the creature. Move slowly toward the door. But Yelna was shaking too badly to move. The Kurtiki jumped down from the table, its 6 legs carrying it quickly across the floor. More acid flew through the air. Minho used the tray like a shield, deflecting the acid away from both of them. He could feel the heat as the metal began to weaken, but he also noticed something else. The creature was scared too. Its movements were defensive, not aggressive. It just wanted to escape. "Easy," Minho said softly, the same way he would talk to a frightened animal back home. "Nobody wants to hurt you." The Kurtiki paused, tilting its head. Its yellow eyes focused on Minho's face. Very slowly, Minho knelt down and placed the damaged tray on the floor. Then he pulled off his jacket and held it out like a blanket. "Come on," he whispered. "Let's get you somewhere safe." The creature studied him for a long moment. Then, to everyone's amazement, it walked forward and let Minho wrap it gently in the jacket. Professor HFY appeared with a new containment unit. His 4 hands were shaking as he opened it. Minho carefully placed the wrapped creature inside and stepped back. The lab was completely silent, except for the sound of emergency ventilators clearing the acid fumes from the air. Every student in the room was staring at Minho. But this time, their expressions weren't just fear. There was something else there, too. Something that looked almost like terror. "You!" Yelna's voice cracked. "You moved so fast. I didn't even see you move." "And you weren't afraid," whispered Zinktar. "A deadly predator was attacking, and you weren't afraid." Minho looked around at all the shocked faces. He had only been trying to help, but he realized now that what looked like helping to him looked like something very different to them. He had just proven everything they feared about humans was true. 3 days passed before anyone would sit near Minho or Sujin again. Word of the lab incident had spread throughout the entire academy. Students whispered as they walked by. Some pointed. Others quickly looked away. Minho ate lunch alone in the corner of the cafeteria. The long tables that used to be full of curious students asking questions about Earth were now empty. Even the cafeteria workers seemed nervous when they served his food. Sujin found him there on the 4th day. She sat down across from him with her tray, ignoring the stares from other students. "This is getting worse," she said quietly. Minho nodded, pushing his food around on his plate. "I was just trying to help Yelna. I didn't want her to get hurt." "I know, but they don't see it that way." Sujin looked around the cafeteria. "They think we're dangerous now. More dangerous than before. Maybe we should just keep quiet. Stay out of the way until this blows over." Sujin shook her head. "It won't blow over. They're more scared of us now than ever. We need to do something." The next morning in advanced xenobiology, Professor HFY made an announcement. "Today we will have student presentations on evolutionary adaptation. Our first presenter will be Minho, speaking about human development on Earth." Minho felt his stomach drop. He had completely forgotten about the assignment, but as he looked around the classroom, he realized this might be his only chance to explain, to help them understand. He walked slowly to the front of the room. The other students watched him like he might explode at any moment. Professor HFY stepped back, giving him plenty of space. "I know what you all think about humans." Minho began. His voice sounded shaky. So he took a deep breath and tried again. "You think we're killers, predators, monsters from a death world." Several students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Yelna was staring at her desk, refusing to look at him. "You're not wrong," Minho continued. Earth is dangerous. Really dangerous. But not in the way you think. He activated the hologram display and showed an image of a peaceful meadow with flowers and trees. This looks safe, right? But this grass has seeds that can cut your skin. Those pretty flowers are poisonous. The trees drop heavy branches without warning. The image changed to show a calm ocean. This water looks beautiful, but there are creatures in it that you can't see. Tiny things that can kill you. Currents that can pull you under. Storms that appear in minutes. Minho changed the image again. Now it showed a city street with people walking, children playing, families sitting in parks. We didn't survive because we became killers, he said. We survived because we learned to take care of each other. Zinktar raised a crystal arm. But the lab incident, you moved like a predator. You weren't afraid. You're right. I wasn't afraid. Minho looked directly at the crystalline student. Do you know why? Zinktar's body flickered with uncertain light. Because I was more worried about Yelna getting hurt than about my own safety. That's not a predator response. That's the opposite. Su-Jin stood up from her seat. Can I add something? Professor Kethvar nodded, looking surprised. Su-Jin walked to front and stood next to Minho. You want to know what makes humans different? We don't run away when others are in danger. We run toward the danger to help. She touched the hologram controls and brought up a new image. It showed human firefighters running into a burning building. These people could die, Su-Jin explained. They know they could die, but they go in anyway because someone might need help. The image changed to show rescue workers pulling people from flood waters, doctors treating patients during wars, teachers protecting students during emergencies. Every human child learns the same rule, Su-Jin continued. If someone smaller or weaker needs help, you help them, even if it's dangerous, even if it hurts you. A student near the back raised her hand. She had soft fur and large, dark eyes. But what about your wars? Your violence? Minho and Su-Jin looked at each other. This was the hard part. Yes, humans fight, Minho admitted, but do you know why? Most of the time, it's because someone is hurting people who can't protect themselves. We fight bullies. We fight people who hurt children. We fight people who take things that don't belong to them. Sometimes we make mistakes, Su-Jin added. Sometimes we fight for the wrong reasons. But most humans hate fighting. We only do it when we think it's the only way to protect someone. Professor Kethvar had been listening quietly. Now he spoke up. Are you saying that human aggression is actually a protective response? Yes. Both humans said at the same time. Minho turned to face Yelna directly. When I stepped in front of you in a lab, I wasn't thinking about hunting or being a predator. I was thinking about my little sister back home, about how scared she gets during thunderstorms. I couldn't let anything hurt you because you reminded me of her. For the first time in days, Yelna looked up and met his eyes. The Kurtiki wasn't really trying to attack. Minho continued. It was scared and trying to escape. I could see that because I knew what scared looked like. I've been scared lots of times. The classroom was very quiet. Students were looking at each other, then back at the two humans standing at the front. So when you see something dangerous, asked the furry student, your first thought is to protect others? Yes, Su-Jin replied. That's what humans do. We protect each other. 2 weeks passed after Minho and Su-Jin's presentation. The atmosphere in the academy slowly began to change. Students still kept their distance, but the fear in their eyes had softened into something more like curiosity. Some even nodded politely when they passed in the hallways. Minho was reviewing his notes in the library when the emergency alarm started blaring. Red lights flashed throughout the building, and a mechanical voice echoed through the corridors. All students report to designated safe areas immediately. This is not a drill. Hostile ships detected approaching the station. The library erupted into chaos. Students from dozens of different worlds scrambled toward the exits, their different languages mixing into a wall of panic. The bird-like Silnari took flight, their wings beating frantically against a high ceiling. Crystal students like Zinktar made loud chiming sounds of distress. Minho closed his books and stood up calmly. He had been through emergency drills back on Earth. The key was not to panic. He looked around and saw Yelna standing frozen by the history section. Her green skin had gone pale, and her large eyes were wide with terror. Other students pushed past her in their rush to escape, but she couldn't seem to move. Yelna, Minho called out, walking toward her. We need to go to the safe areas. She turned to look at him, and he could see that she was shaking. I can't, she whispered. I can't move. I'm too scared. Before Minho could respond, Su-Jin appeared beside them. She had been studying in another section of the library. What's the situation? She asked. Hostile ships, Minho replied. Yelna's having a panic response. Su-Jin nodded and knelt down in front of Yelna. Hey, look at me, she said gently. Remember what we talked about in class? About how humans protect each other. We're not going to leave you here. The alarms continued blaring. Through the library's large windows, they could see small, dark ships moving toward the station. The shapes looked wrong somehow, with sharp angles and weapons that glowed an angry red. Corvex raiders, said a voice behind them. They turned to see Professor Kevar hurrying toward them with several other students who had been hiding behind the shelves. They attacked space stations for supplies and prisoners. Minho felt his heart rate increase, but his mind became clearer, more focused. This was the human stress response that the other species found so frightening. But right now, it was exactly what they needed. Professor, what's the fastest route to the safe areas? He asked. The main corridors are blocked by debris from their first attack, Professor Ketvar replied, his forearms moving nervously. The maintenance tunnels might work, but they're dark and confusing. I can handle dark and confusing, Su-Jin said. She looked around at the group of frightened students. But we need to move now. An explosion shook the station. Several books fell from the shelves, and the lights flickered. Yelna made a small crying sound and wrapped her arms around herself. Minho made a decision. He gently picked up Yelna, lifting her like she weighed nothing. I've got you, he told her. You're safe. Instead of being afraid of his strength, Yelna relaxed in his arms. For the first time, she seemed to understand that his physical power wasn't meant to hurt her. Everyone stay close, Su-Jin called out. Hold on to the person in front of you. Don't let go. They formed a chain with the two humans at the front and back. Professor Kethvar, Zinktar, and 6 other students stayed between them. Su-Jin led them through a maintenance door and into the dark tunnels that ran through the station's walls. The tunnels were barely tall enough for them to walk upright. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows on the metal walls. They could hear the sounds of battle echoing through the station above them. Explosions, shouting voices, the whine of energy weapons. Left here, Professor Kevvar whispered, checking a map on his datapad. They moved through the maze of tunnels for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Every few seconds, the station shook from another impact. Once, they heard footsteps running overhead, and everyone held their breath. Finally, they reached a door marked with safety symbols. Su-Jin opened it carefully and looked out. It's clear, she said. Safe area is just down this corridor. But as they started to leave the tunnel, they heard new sounds. Heavy footsteps, harsh voices speaking in a language none of them recognized. The Corvex raiders had found this section of the station. Back in the tunnel, Minho whispered urgently, Stay quiet. They pressed themselves against the tunnel walls as armed figures passed by outside. Minho could see them to the crack in the door. Tall creatures in dark armor, carrying weapons that hummed with energy. One of the raiders stopped outside their door. Minho heard him speaking into a communication device. The words were in an alien language, but the meaning was clear. They were searching for survivors. The raider reached for the door handle. Minho handed Yelna to Zinktar and stepped forward. If the door opened, he would be the first thing the raider saw. He would give the others time to run deeper into the tunnels. But the door never opened. Other voices called the raider away, and his footsteps moved down the corridor. They waited in the dark for another 10 minutes before Su-Jin risked looking out again. They're gone, she whispered. The group made it to the safe area without any more problems. Inside, hundreds of students and teachers waited for the all-clear signal. When Min-ho carried Yelna through the door, a cheer went up from the other students who recognized him. Later, after the Corvex raiders had been driven off by station security, Professor Kevvar gathered his advanced xenobiology class together. "I owe you all an apology," he said, looking directly at Min-ho and Su-jin. "We called you dangerous. We called you killers. We were right about one thing. You are killers, but not the kind we feared." He gestured to Yelna, who was sitting close to Min-ho for the first time since they had met. "You are killers of fear, killers of panic, killers of the idea that some people matter less than others." Professor Kevvar's golden eyes seemed to glow as he spoke. "A killer walked into our class, but he didn't come to destroy. He came to show us what it really means to be strong." The other students looked at Min-ho and Su-jin with new understanding. These human Deathworlders had left them speechless, not with terror, but with admiration for what their dangerous world had taught them. Sometimes the greatest strength comes not from being able to destroy, but from choosing to protect instead.